There's so much to talk about going into week 5. We're going to break down Davante Adams' trade request, the games going into week 5, and everything else you need to know going into week 5. And starting it off here, let's look at the Davante Adams trade request. So obviously yesterday or the day before, Davante Adams did request a trade from the Raiders, and at the top of his list are the Jets and the Saints. And let's start off by looking at this from the Jets perspective. So honestly, for the Jets, this trade doesn't really make much sense to me. You already have Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard as your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 options. On top of that, Rodgers already has Mike Williams as his wide receiver 3 option. And yes, Davante Adams would be a huge upgrade for the Jets, but Garrett Wilson already is building a pretty solid connection with Aaron Rodgers. Allen Lazard is a great wide receiver 2 option for Aaron Rodgers due to his connection already being there. And Mike Williams, we're also seeing a connection being made as well. So in my opinion, there's really no reason for the Jets to do this trade, and they'd be giving up so many assets that it just doesn't make sense to me. Looking at the New Orleans Saints, though, I do think that they could pull off this trade if they really want to contend this year. Looking at the receivers, you got Chris Olave, a stud wide receiver for the Saints. Rashid Shaheed is a very good option for deep shots only, really. And I think that Derek Carr has shown that he can, air that ball out. Obviously, he's obviously checking down the ball still to Alvin Kamara. And we're seeing Chris Olave get more involved in this offense as the season goes on. So I do think if they want to get Davante Adams, it would definitely work out better for the Saints and the Jets. And I do think that it's going to be interesting to see what Adams does and which team is going to give up the assets for him. And now that we're done talking about Davante Adams, let's go ahead and start off with looking at the Thursday night football game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. So for starters, this game, the Falcons are actually favorites to win by 1.5 points currently by Vegas. And, we're looking more in depth here. The Buccaneers are actually the worst ranked rushing team. So honestly, I could see Bijan Robinson having a really big role in this game. And we're also seeing that the Buccaneers do actually have the 10th best rated passing defense. So it might be a little bit of a struggle here for Kirk Cousins to cover over on his passing lines. Looking more towards the Buccaneers side of things, I do think that we're going to continue to see Baker Money just absolutely throw this ball out. Looking at the defense for the Falcons, they're the 19th best team considering with passing. They're also the 21st best team considering rushing. So, looking at all of that stuff, I do think that we're going to continue to see Baker throw the ball here. I think that Mike Evans is going to get more involved. Chris Godwin, I think, is also going to get a lot of yards. But I really do want to continue to look at Rachaad White and Bucky Irving's role. As we saw last game, we did actually see more of a 50-50 split, which is going to be something interesting to watch down the line. I do think eventually that Bucky Irving, if it's not this year, possibly next year, he could honestly take this spot from Rachaad White. And I think that, that's just something interesting to monitor for the rest of the year. And this game is obviously between two NFC South rivalries, so we know it's going to be good. But, looking overall, I do actually think I'm going to go with the dogs here and go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, just because I think that Baker Money is going to continue to dominate, and I think that Mike Evans is going to continue to get more work in this offense. So I do think the Buccaneers are actually going to win this game over the Falcons. Next up, let's look at the Jets versus the Vikings game. This game, I believe, is in Europe because it is at 8:30 a.m., which is kind of crazy. But looking past that, right, we're looking at the Vikings defense, right? So they've been dominant for the whole year. The one thing, though, that they have been giving up is passing yards to receivers, right? We're looking at Nico Collins when the Vikings played the Texans. Collins went off. He had almost 100 yards, I believe. We look at their other games, right? Against the Packers, Jaden Reed had almost 180 yards. Against the 49ers, I believe Deebo Samuel also had a good amount of passing volume. Against the Giants, Malik Neighbors, it was his first game. I think he had like 50 yards. But, with all this in mind, I really do want to focus on Garrett Wilson, right? Obviously, so far, Garrett Wilson has been underperforming. So, I do think that this game is honestly the perfect opportunity for him to showcase the talent and his connection with Aaron Rodgers. And if they are able to do this, I do think that they're going to take this game away from the undefeated Vikings. But, looking overall right now, we're seeing the Vikings be favored by 2.5 points. So, definitely another game that's going to be pretty good. I do think this is also going to be a testament towards the Jets offense overall. If Breece Hall can get back into this offensive load where we saw him being a workhorse back, that'd be amazing, especially for my fantasy team. And, looking at the Vikings side of things, though, I do think that this is also going to be a test for them going against the Jets' passing defense. Right now, they actually do have the 9th best passing efficiency in the entire NFL, but the Jets have the 2nd best defense passing-wise. So, something to look for in the game, and I do think this is also going to be another competitive one, but I do think the Jets are going to take it away. Next up, let's look at the Panthers versus the Bears game. Honestly, there's not really much to talk about here, other than I do think that Aaron Donald is going to continue to throw the ball a lot. I think last game he only had 220 passing yards, so definitely not a very good game from Andy Dalton comparing to the week before that. But I do think against this Bears defense, who is actually 4th in passing, it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle for Andy Dalton. Looking at the offense for the Bears, I do think Caleb Williams is going to continue to throw this ball. I do wonder, though, how they're going to utilize DeAndre Swift. Obviously, last week, we saw him do really, really well with his rushing yards. He was basically the workhorse back of this offense, which was kind of contrary to what we've been seeing almost the entire year with Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert getting a lot of carries, too. So, definitely something to monitor here. Overall, I do think that the Bears are going to take this game, though. I do think it's just really hard for the Red Rocket, considering, how many people are on this team that honestly just aren't that good. All right, we got another banger here with an AFC North rivalry between the Ravens and the Bengals. Right now, looking at this game, the Bengals are currently underdogs by 3 points, and we're looking at the offense right now for the Ravens. They're the best rushing team. They have the 5th best passing efficiency, and their pressure rate is number 4, which basically means that they're allowing the 4th least amount of pressures, right? The Bengals defense absolutely sucks. I mean, just straight up. They have the 25th best passing defense, the 28th best rushing, and the 29th best at pressure, which it's hard for me to equate those in worst. I think 7th worst in passing, 4th worst in rushing, and the 3rd worst at pressuring the quarterback. So definitely a game here where we're going to see Derrick Henry go off. I do think that this is also another game where we could see Zay Flowers go off too. Like I talked about with Garrett Wilson, obviously Zay Flowers has not been having a great year. But looking at the other side of things with the Bengals, they have the 8th best passing offense right now. And I do think that we're going to continue to see T. Higgins' role continue to develop over time. And honestly, I think that this Ravens defense, right now they're ranked 17th in the NFL in passing. So something to look at is definitely going to be Joe Burrow and how he attacks the Ravens passing defense. Looking at the rushing defense, though, I do think that this might be a challenge for Chase Brown and Zach Moss. Right now, the Ravens defense are number 5 in the NFL. I mean, overall, I think that this game is actually going to be really close. I do actually think that the Ravens are going to take this one, though. It's just so hard for me to trust in the Bengals right now, considering how, wishy-washy they've been. But if you have either team from the Bengals or Ravens, I honestly think that you have to start them looking at fantasy, because the total for this game right now is over under 50.5 points, which that's 25 points for each team. That's absolutely insane. So that's just something on the side if you guys wanted to know. Oh my gosh, this week actually has so many bangers. I wasn't even really looking, but we also have the Texans versus the Bills here. So obviously 2 of the best teams in the AFC. Right now the Bills are actually favored by 1 point. So something interesting there. Looking at the offense for the Bills, they're currently number 2 in passing, 15th in rushing, and number 9 in allowing pressure. Looking at the Texans defense, though, we're looking at the 12th best passing defense, the 7th worst rushing defense, and the 2nd best at getting towards the quarterback and pressuring him. So I do think that right now for the Bills, this is definitely going to be a game where we're going to see a lot of running from Josh Allen and James Cook. I think that that's definitely a possibility. I think that the passing also is definitely going to be there, considering they're number 2 in the NFL right now. I do kind of worry, though, considering that this Texans defense has actually been really good in the passing game. But I mean, overall, I do think that this game is also going to be interesting looking at the Texans offensive side of things, right? The Bills are actually 3rd in passing efficiency on the defensive side, but they are actually 2nd worst in rushing efficiency. So definitely a spot here where Joe Mixon could go off. I do think that CJ Stroud is going to continue to throw this ball downfield to Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, though. So looking overall here, I do think that the Texans are going to win this game. Obviously, I am a biased Texans fan, so take that with a grain of salt looking at this game, but that's who I would go with winning. Next up here, we got a game that's definitely not going to be as exciting as the other ones we were looking at between the Jags and the Colts. Obviously, another AFC South rivalry game. Honestly, just looking at it from my perspective, I really think that this game is one where Anthony Richardson could potentially go off, right? The Jags have the 2nd worst passing defense in the entire NFL. Something that, Anthony Richardson could potentially exploit if, he eventually does, right? We're going to see no Jonathan Taylor this week, so we could see Anthony Richardson rushing volume go up a lot as well, unless the Colts decide to use Trey Sermon as a workhorse running back. Looking at the offense for the Jaguars, though, they really aren't going to be able to get anything going until Trevor Lawrence really steps it up. I think in the Texans game, he was all right. They definitely had a couple of opportunities there to win, but I really just think overall, if Trevor Lawrence can step this up, then, the Jags hopefully won't be 0-5 going into week 6. Overall, though, I do think that the Colts are going to win this game, and I do think that we're actually probably going to see Anthony Richardson get back into a rhythm. Next up here, let's look at the Dolphins and the Patriots. So really, there's not much to say here. The Patriots are actually favored by 2 points in this game, and it's really not surprising, right? The Dolphins offense is so bad with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. Devon Achane couldn't even get anything going, right? I mean, Tyreek Hill got a couple receptions here and there, but this game is just going to be really tough for the Dolphins to win, and honestly, it's just so sad, right? we're looking at teams that got, their star quarterback injured, like, let's say the San Francisco 49ers a couple of years ago, right? I mean, I guess you wouldn't consider Jimmy G a star, but you had someone like Brock Purdy step up into this role, and he was able to continue the 49ers tradition of winning, right? With the Dolphins, no one's stepping up in this quarterback role and helping to win, and this really is what separates great teams from, subpar teams, right? I mean, looking at the Patriots side of things, we're just going to continue to see them be, like, a really bad team this whole year. I mean, it's no surprise to anyone, obviously, so I do actually think that the Dolphins will win this game, though, just because it's just really hard for me to think that the Patriots are going to beat the Dolphins. But let's go on to the next game here. And that next game will be the Browns versus the Commanders. So this is also a spot where I could potentially see Deshaun Watson getting back into a rhythm, considering how bad Washington's defense is in the passing game. They're actually the worst team right now rated in passing efficiency. So definitely something for Deshaun to exploit as well. We got David Njoku coming back, who is a big target for Deshaun Watson, obviously. Amari Cooper, someone who I'm looking at to go off. Looking at the Commanders side of things, they actually have the number 1 offense for passing, the number 2 offense for rushing. And I mean, this Commanders offense right now is absolutely shocking everyone. Like, no one expected the Commanders to be this good, especially me. I didn't think that they're going to be this good. But right now, they're actually favorites in this game by 1 point. And I do think that the Commanders are going to take this game away just because of the fact of how good their offense has been. And I just think that, Deshaun Watson probably will step up in this game. At least I hope, because I really want to see, him get back into a groove, into a rhythm. So I think that this game is definitely going to be one to watch, though, but I do have to go with the Commanders. Well, and we started off with so many good games here, and now we're just kind of getting the dumpster fire. We got the Raiders versus the Broncos here, and, the Broncos are actually favorites in this game by 2.5 points. I mean, it's not really too surprising considering how bad the Raiders' offense looked last week without Davante Adams. And, obviously their rushing game is actually the worst in the NFL right now. They obviously don't have an RB1 right now with Zamir White and Alexander Mattison splitting that role. But, I mean, looking at the defense for the Broncos, I think that this is just going to be too much for the Raiders to handle. They got actually the number 1 passing defense, the number 6 rushing defense, and they have the 6th best pressure rate. So I think that the Broncos should take this game just because of their defense, right? I mean, their offense really isn't that good. Bo Nix at quarterback definitely isn't going to help you win that many games. So I still have to go with the Broncos just because of how good their defense has been this year. Next up, looking at the Cardinals versus 49ers game, we are looking at the 49ers being favored by 7 points, which is crazy. I think that, this game definitely is going to be a lot closer than 7 points. At least I hope so. Looking at the offense for the Cardinals right now, they're the 10th best in passing, 11th best in rushing, and the 10th best in allowing the least amount of pressure. Looking at the defense for the 49ers, we're looking at the 9th best passing defense, 10th best rushing defense, the 4th best in pressuring the quarterback. So definitely a little bit of an advantage there for the Niners. But the main thing I want to look at is the defense for the Cardinals. I mean, their passing defense is really bad this year, 26 in passing, and we're looking at their rushing. It's also really bad at 23, and they're 31st in pressure rate. Looking at that, I do think that it's very reasonable to say that the 49ers are going to win this game, especially considering you have Deebo Samuel back in action, and, you're going to have George Kittle, hopefully, and Jordan Mason, and Brock Purdy. I think this offense is just going to continue to explode, and I think that Brandon Ayuk is someone to continue to monitor, just considering that he really hasn't had a good year to start. I do think that this is potentially a spot for Ayuk to get more targets and, receiving yards and do what he needs to do to be successful on the NFL field. And I think I said this, but I'm going to have to go with the 49ers to win this game. Next up, let's look at the Packers versus the Rams. The main thing I want to point out from this game is I think that Jordan Love's going to go off, right? This Rams defense is the 31st best in passing efficiency, which means they're the 2nd worst passing defense. I think that, obviously the Rams are going to not be able to contain Jordan Love and Jaden Reed. I think that we're going to continue to see Jaden Reed just absolutely go ballistic like we did last week. So definitely a spot here for them to go off. Looking at the Rams side of things, I think it's definitely going to be a little bit more of a struggle bus, especially, obviously with no Puka Nacua or with no Cooper Kupp. We've seen this kind of for the year, basically, where they've had none of their 2 alpha receivers. They've really been struggling on the offensive side of the ball, and they're currently 1-3, right? So definitely they need to win the game if they want to be considered in the playoffs. Starting off 1-4 definitely is not good. So I do think that the Packers win this game, though, but I think that it's going to be a little bit interesting to watch. Next up, let's look at the Giants versus the Seahawks game, where I do think that the Seahawks are going to take this. The current money line right now is that the Seahawks are favorites by 6 points. And, I mean, we're looking at Malik Neighbors' injury, right? We still haven't gotten official word if he's playing or not. I don't think we're going to get official word until Friday, actually. But overall, I do think that, you know, the Seahawks defense might be a little bit too much for Daniel Jones. Right now, they're the 8th best in passing. So, definitely something to look at there. And, I mean, if Geno Smith can continue to play the way he's playing, I mean, I think it's going to be really hard for this Giants defense to stop him. And, you know, on top of that, Kenneth Walker is going off. Last game, he had 12 carries, 80 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's just absolutely insane, right? And I think that we're actually going to continue to see this from the Seattle Seahawks, because I just think that their offense right now is really good, and they're just riding a high, right? I do think that Seahawks' explosive offense is just going to be too much for the Giants. All right, we got our last 2 games here, starting off with the Cowboys versus the Steelers. This is another one that I think is going to be really good, right? Obviously, the Steelers' defense is absolutely amazing right now. They did actually get exposed by the Colts last week, though, so a couple of their rankings are, you know, not as high as you would like them to see, especially with their passing efficiency. Right now they're 15th. Their rushing efficiency though is number 1, so definitely do not start any of the Cowboys running backs, and I don't know why you would be starting them anyway unless you're in like a 20-man league. But looking at the side of things for the Cowboys, I think that if Dak Prescott continues to just target CeeDee Lamb, then they're going to be okay in their passing game, right? I think that last game, obviously, the Cowboys couldn't really do too much because of the Giants' time of possession. They were really hogging the ball there on that Thursday Night Football game. But I do think that it's going to be definitely a game to watch, right? I think that, you know, the Cowboys defense hopefully is going to step it up against this weak offense for the Steelers. Overall, I do think that the Cowboys are going to win this game just because I think that, like the Seahawks, their offense is so explosive and they can just go absolutely nuclear whenever. Looking at this game, though, actually I did not say the money line here. The Steelers are favored by 2.5 points, so definitely something to look at. I think that the Cowboys are easily going to win this game. All right, our last game here, we got the Saints versus the Chiefs. So the Chiefs are 6.5 favorites here. There's not really much to talk about, in my opinion. I mean, we can definitely look at the fact that, you know, the Chiefs don't have Rashee Rice anymore, so I think that Travis Kelce is going to get a lot of the workload from this offense. I don't really think Xavier Worthy's going to get too much of the targets, just because, like I said before, with Hollywood Brown's injury, I think that that was more helpful for Xavier Worthy, especially looking at a fantasy purpose, because Rashee Rice really wasn't like a deep shot type of guy. He was more like a, you know, quick medium route guy, so something to look at there for the Chiefs. But I mean, overall, if the Saints offense honestly can just be as explosive as it was in those first 3 weeks, then they definitely do have a chance against this Chiefs defense. I do have the Chiefs winning this game just because of how good Patrick Mahomes is, but I think it's gonna be a lot closer than 6.5 points. I think that we probably will see like a field goal game here, which is definitely gonna be pretty interesting to watch. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into the bye weeks of this week though. And so this week we're not having the Eagles, the Chargers, the Lions, or the Titans play football. So, you know, just something I want to look at here really is the Eagles with AJ Brown. I think that we're going to continue to see him recover, obviously, and I think that this week is going to be a big help. I think week 6, when the time comes, we're going to see AJ Brown in full form. Looking at the Chargers too, I think that Justin Herbert hopefully will be healed from whatever injury he's dealing with. I know he's been banged up in a lot of different places, so something to look at there. And that's the end of today's video. I really do appreciate you guys for making it all the way through. If you guys like the video, make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to keep all my links in the description. That includes my Twitter, my blog, my TikTok, and basically everything else that you need to know if you want to see more content from me. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.